What if the people you trusted most weren't just betrayers, but murderers in disguise? When secrets buried in shadows rise to the surface, one woman's fight for truth turns into a war for survival. Every lie has a price, and tonight, someone will pay it in blood. Are you ready for the revenge? The city of Haveth had a way of swallowing secrets. Its skyline glittered like shards of broken glass under the moonlight, but beneath the neon and noise, shadows moved with intention. Noelle Draven knew those shadows well, because she lived among them. At 32, she had built a reputation as one of the sharpest corporate intelligence analysts in the city. To the world, she was a strategist for powerful firms, the kind of woman who could unravel hidden patterns in data and expose financial loopholes in weeks. But behind her steel-gray eyes and calm demeanor was a woman carved from betrayal. Tonight, though, wasn't about work. Noelle leaned against the balcony rail of her high-rise apartment, the cold wind pressing strands of black hair across her lips. Her phone buzzed again, flashing an encrypted message. "It's time. They've moved the first piece. Meet me at the archives." Her jaw tightened. She had been waiting months for this message, ever since she discovered the forged contracts buried deep inside her firm's system, contracts tied to the people who had ruined her life years ago. She slipped inside, locking the balcony door behind her. The apartment was minimalist, almost sterile, save for a single framed photograph on the mantel. Noelle with the man, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing. The photo was taken 6 years ago, before he betrayed her, before everything collapsed. Her hand brushed the frame. She didn't allow herself to linger. Pulling on her leather jacket, she strapped a small drive to the inside pocket. She didn't trust anyone, not her colleagues, not her so-called allies. The city was a chessboard, and every move had to be calculated. The archives were across town, an abandoned library repurposed by data brokers and smugglers. At night, its stained glass windows looked like bruises against the street lamps. As she walked through the empty corridors, her boots echoing softly, she felt the weight of anticipation pressing down. From the darkness, a familiar voice emerged. Noelle Draven, still walking into danger without backup. She froze. The voice belonged to Damien Vaynar, the same man from the photograph, the one who had betrayed her 6 years ago. Her pulse quickened, but her face betrayed nothing. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. Damien's smile was sharper than a blade, his tailored suit out of place in the crumbling library. "You," she said, her tone flat, controlled. "Me," he replied, stepping closer. "And I've been waiting for this reunion far longer than you know." The silence between them stretched, thick with history, regret, and unspoken fury. And that was when Noelle realized the game she thought she was starting tonight had already begun. The city lights blurred past as Noelle guided her car through the damp streets, the storm still pressing heavily on the windshield. Her mind, however, was far from the road. Daniel's words echoed in her memory, half-truths, carefully measured lies disguised as tenderness. For months, she had ignored the inconsistencies, convincing herself that doubt was the enemy of love. But tonight, the weight of unease could no longer be silenced. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message. She hesitated before reaching for it, her heart thudding harder than the rain against the glass. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Noelle tightened her grip on the wheel, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Working late. The same excuse he had used 3 nights ago. The same phrase that had once reassured her, now dripping with deceit. Instead of heading home, she made a sharp turn and drove across town. Her destination was one she had only visited once before, the gallery where Daniel's late nights supposedly unfolded. The streets grew quieter as she approached, the last of the evening traffic thinning into shadows. The gallery's lights were off, its large glass windows reflecting nothing but the neon signs across the street. Noelle parked at a distance, killing her engine and sinking low into the seat. She watched, waiting. Minutes dragged into an hour, the clock glowing 11:47 p.m. Her breathing steadied, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. She had almost convinced herself that she was being paranoid, that Daniel would emerge with a stack of files, his tie loosened, and an innocent explanation ready on his lips. But then, a sleek black car pulled up outside the gallery. Noelle's breath caught as Daniel stepped out, his posture relaxed, his smile unguarded. He wasn't alone. A woman slid out from the passenger side, her laughter spilling into the night as Daniel reached for her hand. The world inside Noelle's chest cracked. She sat frozen, her fingers digging into the steering wheel as the pair walked toward the side entrance, Daniel holding the door open with a gentleness that once belonged only to her. Her stomach knotted. Anger, betrayal, sorrow, all colliding at once. But beneath the chaos of emotions, something sharper began to form. Not despair. Not surrender. Resolve. Noelle pulled her coat tighter, her eyes locked on the darkened building. She would not confront him tonight. That would be too easy for him. Too predictable. No, she would wait. She would gather every thread of his lies, weave them into a noose, and when the time was right, Daniel would watch the life he had built on deceit collapse around him. As she started the car and drove away, the storm outside raged louder, as if the heavens themselves echoed her fury. But inside her chest, amidst the ache, a fire had begun to burn, one that would not be extinguished until the truth was unearthed and justice, in all its brutal honesty, was served. The clock struck midnight, and the city outside Noelle's apartment window glimmered with restless lights. She sat curled in an armchair, the dim yellow lamp casting a soft glow across her face. The glass of untouched wine on the table reflected her weary eyes. Her phone buzzed, an encrypted message from an unknown number. "He isn't who you think he is. Look closer." Her pulse quickened. Noelle's fingers trembled as she set the phone down. She had always trusted her instincts, but tonight, doubt gnawed at her like a persistent shadow. Who sent the message? And who exactly were they talking about? Images of Adrian, his reassuring smile, his gentle touch, the way he had held her hand when she confessed her fears, flashed before her. Could he really be hiding something? Noelle shut her eyes, refusing to believe it. But the more she resisted, the louder the voice of suspicion echoed in her chest. She grabbed her coat and keys. Answers wouldn't come by waiting. The streets were quiet, eerily so. As she drove across the empty boulevard, her mind replayed every detail. Adrian's late-night calls he brushed off as work emergencies, his sudden disappearances, the slip of a foreign accent in one of his heated conversations when he thought she wasn't listening. Her car rolled to a stop outside Adrian's sleek downtown office building. From the shadows, she watched as he stepped out of a black car, not alone. A tall, sharp-dressed man followed him, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Noelle strained her ears. She caught only fragments. Shipment compromised, deal falls through, she can't know. Her breath hitched. She can't know. Were they talking about her? The men entered the building, and for the first time, Adrian's face was stripped of the warmth she knew. His expression was cold, calculating. The sight shattered something deep inside her. Noelle backed away, her heartbeat pounding against her ribs. She didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was undeniable. As she slid back into her car, another message lit her phone screen. If you want the truth, follow the trail. Tomorrow, midnight. Pier 47. Her hands clenched the steering wheel. A storm was brewing inside her, a mix of dread, betrayal, and the faintest spark of determination. Whatever secrets Adrian carried, she would uncover them. And this time, she wouldn't let her heart blind her. The candlelight flickered against the tall windows of Noelle's apartment as she sat curled on the sofa, staring at the photograph in her hand. Her brother's smile, frozen in time, only deepened the ache in her chest. For the first time in months, her tears flowed freely, not of weakness, but of a vow that was silently being etched into her heart. She whispered his name, her voice trembling. "I'll make them pay." A knock rattled the door, breaking her moment. She quickly wiped her face, collected the scattered papers on the coffee table, and shoved them into a folder. When she opened the door, she found Adrian standing there, his expression unreadable, eyes shadowed with concern. "I thought you might need company," he said softly, holding up 2 steaming cups of coffee. Despite the heaviness pressing down on her, Noelle allowed a small smile. "You always know when to show up." He stepped inside, his presence filling the room with warmth she hadn't felt in so long. They sat in silence, sipping their coffee, until Adrian finally asked, "You've been digging into dangerous waters, haven't you?" Her breath caught. She had never told him about the evidence she had been gathering, about the late nights of tracing names, accounts, and whispers of corruption that stretched far beyond what the public knew. "Why do you say that?" she asked cautiously. "Because," he said, locking eyes with her, "your enemies aren't the type to forgive curiosity. And I can't stand the thought of you getting hurt." The raw emotion in his tone stirred something inside her. For years, she had buried her feelings, focused only on surviving each day. But in that moment, Adrian's sincerity pierced through her defenses. "Adrian," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "there are things you don't know. Things I have to do. If you stay close to me, you'll be dragged into it." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "Then let me be dragged in. I'd rather fight beside you than watch from the shadows." Her heart thudded in her chest. For a brief second, she imagined a world where her brother was still alive, where she and Adrian could simply exist without fear or revenge. But that world no longer existed. "No one can know," she said firmly. "Not yet. Promise me you'll trust me, even if I can't tell you everything." Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I promise." The night grew deeper, the city lights shimmering beyond the glass. When he left, the apartment felt colder than before. Noelle sank back into the sofa, her thoughts racing. She knew she was crossing a threshold, one that could never be uncrossed. She pulled the hidden folder back out and spread its contents across the table. Names, dates, coded messages, all threads leading to the powerful men she believed were responsible for her brother's death. At the center of it all was one name, circled in red ink, staring back at her like a predator's eyes in the dark. Noelle's chest tightened, but instead of fear, a cold determination took root. Her life was no longer her own. It was a weapon, and tonight, she had sharpened it. Far away, in a shadowed office overlooking the city, another figure received a message. A single line appeared on the glowing screen. "She's getting too close." The man leaned back in his chair, a smirk forming on his lips. "Then it's time we remind her who she's dealing with." The next morning, Noelle woke up with a heaviness she couldn't shake off. The air inside her apartment felt colder than usual, the silence pressing on her chest like an invisible weight. She stood before the mirror, brushing her hair, and caught herself staring into her own reflection, eyes shadowed, lips parted as if trying to speak the truth she wasn't ready to admit. Something in her world was shifting, but she couldn't quite put it into words. She forced herself into her daily routine, dressing sharply for work, layering perfume that always gave her a sense of confidence. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed with a message. She expected it to be her best friend, Mara, or perhaps her mother. But the number was unknown. "You don't know the whole story. Meet me. Tonight. Same cafe. Midnight." Her pulse quickened as her thumb hovered above the screen. The message seemed cryptic, almost like a threat wrapped in politeness. Who would send this? And why mention the cafe? The very place where just days ago she had felt a strange pull of destiny when she first crossed paths with Adrian, the man who now occupied her thoughts more than she cared to admit. At the office, she tried burying herself in work, but her mind drifted. Every ringing phone startled her. Every knock at her door sent her heart racing. Even Adrian's text, just a casual check-in asking if she had eaten breakfast, made her feel conflicted. She wanted to tell him about the message, but some instinct whispered don't. Not yet. By evening, the sky turned an ominous gray, heavy with unfallen rain. Noelle left work early and returned home, pacing the length of her apartment like a caged bird. Midnight loomed closer with each glance at the clock. Finally, unable to bear the suspense, she slipped into her coat and drove to the cafe. The streets were unusually quiet, the lamps casting long shadows across wet pavement. When she arrived, the cafe was nearly empty, just a lone man at the counter and a couple whispering in the corner. Noelle chose a booth by the window, her breath fogging the glass as she waited. Minutes passed. Her heart pounded with each opening of the door, each ring of the bell above it. Finally, someone approached. A woman in her late 30s, dressed plainly but with sharp, wary eyes. She slid into the seat across from Noelle, without asking permission. "Noelle Draven?" she asked softly. Noelle nodded, her voice catching. "Yes. Who are you?" The woman leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You're in danger. More than you realize. And Adrian, he's not the man you think he is." Noelle's blood ran cold. Her hands trembled under the table, clutching her purse. Every instinct told her to run, but curiosity rooted her to the spot. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The woman glanced around the cafe nervously. "They'll know I've spoken to you if I stay too long. But listen carefully. Your life is about to unravel. The truth is buried deep, and if you want to survive, you need to start asking the right questions. Don't trust too easily." Before Noelle could press for answers, the woman stood abruptly and walked out into the night, leaving behind nothing but the faint smell of rain clinging to her coat. Noelle sat frozen, her mind spinning with fear and suspicion. Her heart ached. Adrian's name had been dragged into this shadowy warning. Could it be true? Or was someone trying to sabotage the fragile connection she had begun to treasure? One thing was clear. Life as she knew it was slipping away, and the lines between love, danger, and betrayal were about to blur beyond recognition. The air around Noelle Draven seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. Shadows stretched long and distorted across the walls of her dimly lit apartment, as though the night itself carried secrets too dangerous to reveal. She sat hunched on the edge of her couch, the flickering light from a single lamp catching the tension in her face. Her mind replayed the moments from earlier, her encounter with Adrian, the unexpected tenderness of his presence, and the cold hostility radiating from Cassandra. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and she could feel it threading itself into her bones. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, jolting her back to reality. The message was brief, written in all caps. "You don't know who you can trust. Stop digging, or you won't live to regret it." Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. It wasn't the first warning she'd received, but this one was different. The tone was sharper, darker, laced with a kind of finality that carried death in its shadow. Her first instinct was to call Adrian. His calm strength had felt like a shield, but then a memory struck her like a blow. Cassandra's cold smile as she whispered, "You think you know him, but you don't." What if Adrian wasn't who he claimed to be? What if Cassandra wasn't merely jealous, but trying to warn her? The paranoia clawed at her, twisting every thought into suspicion. Noelle pushed herself to her feet, pacing the room, her bare footsteps echoing in the silence. She stopped abruptly when she noticed something strange on her desk. Her journal, her private refuge where she had poured her thoughts, doubts, and fears, was open. She never left it open. Someone had been here. The pages weren't just turned. Words were underlined, phrases circled in ink that wasn't hers. Her eyes widened as she read the marked passage. "Trust is the first step toward betrayal." A chill raced down her spine. Whoever had been in her apartment knew her most private fears, and now they were playing with her, twisting them like a knife. Suddenly, a faint creak echoed from the hallway outside her door. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Another creak, closer this time. Her heart pounded as she crept toward the door, every muscle tense, every sound amplified in the suffocating quiet. She reached for the chain lock, her fingers trembling, when the lights in the apartment flickered violently and went out, plunging her into darkness. Silence. Then, a whisper so faint she could almost believe she imagined it, drifting from just beyond the door. "Noelle." Her blood turned to ice. Someone was out there, someone who knew her name. And in that moment, Noelle realized she wasn't caught between Adrian and Cassandra anymore. She was trapped in a far more dangerous game, one where the real enemy hadn't even revealed their face. The doorknob began to turn slowly. The storm had passed, but the chaos it left behind was only beginning. Noelle Draven sat in the dimly lit room of an old countryside inn, her reflection trembling in the cracked mirror before her. Her eyes were red, not from tears alone but from the exhaustion of running, hiding, and never knowing who was truly on her side. The faint scar along her collarbone, courtesy of the last encounter, throbbed like a constant reminder of how dangerously entangled she had become. The fire in the hearth spat embers as the innkeeper, a frail woman with a bent back, shuffled in silently, placing a tray with warm tea and bread on the wooden table. Noelle forced a smile, but her hand lingered on the dagger concealed beneath the folds of her coat. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Only when the door shut did she release her breath. Her thoughts drifted back to Adrian Vaynar, the man who had once promised to protect her, only to vanish in the very moment she needed him most. Had he betrayed her? Or was he, too, a victim in this tangled game? The uncertainty gnawed at her, threatening to unravel the fragile determination she still clung to. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked outside her door. Noelle's body tensed, her fingers closing around the dagger's hilt. A soft knock followed, measured, deliberate. She didn't answer. The handle turned slightly. Her pulse hammered in her throat. In one swift motion, she positioned herself against the wall, blade ready. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the shadowed room. Her heart stumbled. It was Adrian, but he didn't look like the man she remembered. His face was gaunt, eyes sharper, carrying the weight of battles fought in the dark. His coat was wet, his hands unsteady, as though he had traveled for miles without rest. "Noelle," he whispered, his voice hoarse, urgent. "We don't have much time. They're already here." Her grip on the dagger tightened. "You left me. You vanished. And now you walk in with warnings? Tell me why I shouldn't drive this blade straight through you." Adrian's jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. He stepped closer, ignoring the point of her blade aimed at him. "Because if you kill me, you'll never know who orchestrated this, who betrayed you from the very beginning. And it wasn't me." The air between them thickened, filled with the heat of unspoken rage and the faint undercurrent of something else, something far more dangerous than hatred. "Then start talking," Noelle demanded, her voice trembling not with fear, but with the storm of emotions she had buried deep inside. Adrian glanced at the window, his eyes darting toward the silhouettes flickering across the courtyard below. Shadows of armed men, searching. "They already know where you are," he said. "If we don't leave now, everything you've fought for, all of it, ends tonight." Noelle's chest tightened. The world outside was tightening its grip around her, and Adrian's sudden return only twisted the knot of uncertainty. Could she really trust him again? Or was this another cruel trick meant to lure her into surrender? And yet, when the glass shattered suddenly and a knife embedded itself into the wooden frame of the mirror behind her, Noelle didn't hesitate. She grabbed Adrian's arm. "Then we run," she said. But even as they bolted out the back door into the cold, wet night, one question burned in her mind. Was she running with her savior, or with the man who would ultimately destroy her? The room felt like it was breathing with her, shadows stretching and recoiling against the dim light of the single lamp. Noelle sat hunched over the thick folder she'd unearthed, the edges of the papers frayed and yellowed. Her eyes scanned the typewritten lines, each word hammering a crack into the walls of her sanity. The file wasn't just about her father. It was about her. Her name, printed in bold ink. A date, her 16th birthday. Underneath, coded reports, surveillance notes, and photographs of her at school, on the street, even in her own bedroom. Chilling captions marked the images. Subject developing rapidly. Assets should remain unaware of true lineage. Her stomach clenched. The dossier read less like a file and more like an experiment log. Her life had been documented, dissected, and watched. But by whom? The deeper she read, the colder her veins ran. The company her father had supposedly built, Draven Dynamics, wasn't just an investment firm. It was a front, a shell masking something darker. Beneath layers of corporate jargon were references to Phase 2 trials, asset conversion, and the Black Ledger. Noelle's hand trembled as she flipped another page. There was a single photograph stapled to the document. It wasn't of her, it was of a man. Dark eyes, an angular jaw, a faint scar running across his temple. Beneath it, primary handler, subject alpha. Her throat went dry. She recognized him. He was the same man who had brushed past her on the street 2 nights ago, leaving her with a feeling of being hunted. A knock shattered the silence. 3 sharp raps on the door downstairs. Her heart stopped. The knock came again, heavier this time, followed by a voice that echoed through the empty house. Noelle Draven. We know you're inside. Open the door. The folder slid from her lap as adrenaline surged through her. She grabbed the USB drive from the hidden drawer, stuffed the damning documents into her bag, and bolted for the back staircase. Boots thundered against the front porch. The lock rattled. Whoever they weren't here to talk. Noelle's mind raced. Whoever this handler was, he wasn't going to let her walk away. Not now, not after she'd uncovered the truth that was never meant to see daylight. And as the front door cracked under the weight of a battering ram, Noelle realized this was no longer just about her past. It was a war she hadn't chosen, but one she would have to finish. The cafe was quiet, the kind of quiet that sharpened whispers into blades. Noelle sat in the corner booth, her notebook open but untouched, her eyes fixed on the street outside. Every reflection in the glass felt like a ghost, watching, waiting. Across from her, Detective Harris leaned forward. You're stirring a nest of vipers, Noelle. These people don't forgive curiosity. I don't need their forgiveness, she replied, her voice low but steady. I need the truth. Harris sighed, sliding a small envelope across the table. You didn't get this from me. Inside, Noelle found a series of photographs, grainy but damning. Her father, with men she recognized from the reports of corporate corruption, shady investors, black market dealers, and one name she hadn't expected, Victor Hale, her father's longtime business partner. The realization hit like ice water. Hale wasn't just a bystander. He was orchestrating something. Before she could ask, Harris's gaze flicked to the door. A man in a dark coat entered, scanning the cafe with predatory calm. They're here, Harris muttered. You need to go, now. Noelle grabbed the photos and slid out of the booth, her pulse racing. But as she moved toward the back exit, the stranger's eyes locked onto hers. He smiled, a cold, knowing smile that told her he was there for her. She pushed through the kitchen doors, hearing the shuffle of footsteps behind her. Pots clattered, a cook shouted in protest, but Noelle kept moving. She burst out into the alley, only to freeze. A black car idled at the curb, engine humming. Its rear door opened slowly, as if inviting her inside. Noelle. A voice called from the shadows. Smooth, confident, dangerous. We've been waiting. Her hand tightened around the photographs. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just about exposing her father's sins. This was war. The room fell into a suffocating silence after the last grainy video clip ended. Noelle sat perfectly still, her eyes locked on the flickering screen that now displayed nothing but static. Across from her, Eleanor closed the laptop with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the tense air. You see now. Eleanor's voice was cold, calculated. Every thread you've pulled, every face you've trusted, they all lead back to me. Noelle's breath caught in her chest. The revelation wasn't just a betrayal, it was a blueprint of manipulation spanning years. People she had leaned on, trusted, even mourned, Eleanor had placed them like chess pieces. You ruined my life. Noelle's voice trembled, but not with fear, rage. You hollowed out everything I had left. For what? Some twisted control. Eleanor's lips curved into a small, mocking smile. Control?
No.
Survival. While you clung to morality, I built an empire out of shadows. You were too blind to see that you were my most useful pawn. Noelle's nails dug into the wooden table. Her mind raced. She wanted to leap across the room, to silence that smug face, but she knew Eleanor would expect that. Eleanor thrived on reckless moves. The overhead light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Noelle finally leaned forward, her tone sharp and cutting. "You've mistaken me for someone who plays defense." Before Eleanor could respond, the door burst open. Two figures in black tactical gear stormed in, weapons raised. For a heartbeat, Noelle thought they were hers. Backup she hadn't even summoned. But then one of them barked. "Secure her. Alive." Noelle's stomach dropped. Their aim wasn't at Eleanor. It was at her. The betrayal was bigger than she imagined. Eleanor had already called in reinforcements. Noelle lunged sideways, flipping the table for cover just as bullets ripped into the wood. Eleanor didn't flinch. She simply stood, brushing dust from her sleeve, watching with predator's satisfaction. Pinned, outnumbered, and caught in the trap Eleanor had spent years weaving, Noelle realized the horrifying truth. Eleanor hadn't just been pulling strings from the shadows. She had orchestrated this very moment, and Noelle had walked straight into it. The crack of gunfire filled the room. Noelle's escape narrowed to seconds.